details, perhaps, that will be, these witnesses will be questioned about. And simply because there might be a hook doesn't mean they get to go into everything. I mean, this is, again, this was an estimate, 3-week trial. We're now in week 6. This will go into week 7. It seems to me the state's position is let no dead horse go unbeaten. This has got to stop. Thank you.
Of course, the defense, of course, when we had the meeting with Judge Price, at the time, we all agreed with that estimate. It was not just the state. I realize this is going long. I intend to move expeditiously, but the state has the right and the opportunity to do appropriate rebuttal evidence to a defense case, and that will be the focus of the testimony here today.
Your Honor, the right they have is the same right I have. It's the right you allow. I just want to make sure he hadn't got a right to do anything. Thank you.
Well, certainly the state cannot retry the entire case, but the state has the right to reply to contradict certain issues presented by the defense or certain issues of credibility. It has to be finely tailored such that we don't create a situation where a court will be compelled to allow rebuttal, which is almost unheard of. You mentioned State v. Prather. That was my trial. I was a trial judge in that case in Lexington County, a murder case wherein I allowed reply testimony, actually by a SLED agent. The Court of Appeals, in a 2-1 decision, reversed the conviction. Then the Supreme Court reversed the Court of Appeals and reinstated the conviction that was obtained before me. So it can be a controversial and contentious issue. It almost always is, because there has to be a limit to the back and forth. I'm surprised to hear the number of reply witnesses that the state says that it intends to offer. I do not know. The case is so complex. We've had so much testimony. I cannot sit here in advance and rule as to what would be appropriate and what not. I just have to deal with it on an issue by issue, objection by objection basis. And with that, so bring the jury.
Jury is present, sir.
Sure, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Day number 26. 26. You have heard the defense's case. Now the state gets an opportunity to reply. And you may call your first witness.
May it please court, Your Honor, the state calls Ronnie Crosby.
Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You'll have a seat on the stand. If you would state your name for the record and spell your last name, please.
Ronnie Crosby, Crosby.
Good morning, Mr. Crosby.
Good morning.
Just want to go over a few things very quickly in reply to some of the defense case. And the first thing I want to ask you is, you had previously testified about your close relationship with Paul, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
All right. And over the years, did you ever have call to ride around the property with Paul, yours or his?
More on my property, but some on one or more occasions at Moselle as well.
What, if anything, would y'all carry when y'all rode around the property like that?
Why? This is about Paul?
In response.
Yes, sir. This will be in specific response to the defendant's testimony and in his statements as well. I can be specific. I don't want to do a speaking response, but I can ask another question and maybe put it in focus, Your Honor.
Okay.
All right. You heard prior testimony that you don't go around looking for hogs in the daytime because they're nocturnal from the defendant, did you not? Are you familiar that was what was said?
Objection, Your Honor, if it's based on what he's heard or seen. I mean, is this a comment made to him, or if we're going to delve into the appropriate way to hunt hogs day or night? I mean, this is not proper reply. I object.
Objection's overruled.
All right. You want me to?
Yeah, if you don't mind asking a question again.
Sure. All right. The first question is, have you gone riding around the property with your property or the Moselle property with Paul before?
I have.
All right. And what, if anything, would y'all carry when you would go riding the property?
I believe the only time I rode with Paul was would have been looking for hogs, and then more so on my property.
All right. And what, if anything, would you carry when y'all were looking for hogs?
Your Honor, riding with Paul on his property, not Moselle.
Objection's overruled.
Well, people who have hogs on their property, as a general rule, you would always take a rifle with you, be it day or night, because you never know when you're going to see hogs, and because they are such a nuisance, as I spoke to earlier in my testimony, you always want to be, prepared to shoot them. So you would generally have some type of rifle and we with you, a long gun.
Your Honor, he's giving an opinion. He's not been qualified as an expert.
Objection's overruled.
All right. You've had plenty of experience in killing hogs on your property?
Yes, I would disagree with Mr. Harpootly, and I am pretty much an expert about killing hogs.
All right. And you've had plenty of opportunity to go hunting with Paul?
Objection, Your Honor. I apologize to the witness.
And you've had plenty of opportunity to go hunting with Paul or have him hunt on your property?
Yeah, yes, I've been with him, and he's been on my property many more times. I didn't go with him every time he was on my property, but that's the general rule, that you would have a rifle of some sort. Paul, as this jury's been told over and over, was fond of that 300 Blackout. I've been with him while he had it. I usually use some other type of AR framed gun to shoot hogs.
A 223?
Well, 223 or a 6.5 Creedmoor, which is on a AR-10 frame.
Is it common though to carry your rifle and look for hogs in the daytime and to see hogs in the daytime?
Yes. You don't always see them. Sometimes night's better if you're using a night vision scope, but I've killed hundreds of hogs in the daytime riding. It's just something, because there's such a nuisance in the low country and really across the state right now and across the South, that we have a rule that you don't ride the property without a rifle, because you want to try to eliminate as many hogs as you can. And we also trap them.
To your observation, did Alec have a good relationship with the local law enforcement community?
My observation was Alex had a very good relationship with Probably better than the rest of us, saving his father.
Did you on multiple occasions go over in great detail Alec's original story as to what he did on the night of the murders?
On more than one occasion, we discussed his story as I testified to, I don't know how many weeks ago that was, but it was a while.
And what, if anything, did the defendant tell you about whether or not he checked Paul and Maggie before calling 911?
My understanding of what he told me was that he checked them before he called 911.
And was he clear on that point to you?
That was clear to me.
When was the first time you've heard the defendant's latest story admitting that he was in fact at the kennels minutes before the victims were killed?
I haven't watched all of this trial like a lot of people have, but when I heard that Elliot was taking the stand, I believe it was last Thursday, I did set up my workstation so that I could watch his testimony, and it would have been when he told you that he was at the kennels was the first time that I'd ever heard that.
Did Alec ever tell you that he thought the boat case had anything to do with the murders?
Consistent with what Alec told in his testimony, he specifically told me that and told us that he did not believe that anyone on the boat had anything to do with it. I don't recall any other conversations with him related to the boat case, but he specifically did not believe, and I think that's what he said last week, that anybody on the boat. But as far as anybody outside, there was a lot of speculation going on, but I don't remember ever discussing that with him. And
With him.
right, because we wouldn't know. I mean, everything beyond was, I don't know. It would have been speculation, but I didn't have a conversation with him about that.
Did you ever have a conversation with the defendant about Barrett Bulwer needing money because of his illness?
And you're referring to, yes, I did in I believe it would have been June of 2018.
What was that session?
Barrett and Alec were very, what I consider to be very close.
Improper reply.
Yes, sir. The defendant during cross-examination was specifically asked about this particular transaction and that we're about to discuss. And Mr. Crosby's testimony would be in response to what the defendant said about the money, and in as much as he tried to imply that, well, Barrett kind of owed me money anyway, as justification for him stealing money from one of his best friends.
He did not ask him about a conversation he had with Mr. Crosby about that money. This isn't proper reply. This is going off on another tangent.
Overrule the objection.
Can you tell us about that conversation, please, Mr. Crosby?
Yes, and if my year's wrong, but I believe, because I didn't know exactly what you were going to ask me, and I can go back and look at documents, but I'm sure it's in one of these exhibits when that occurred, the materials that Ms. Seckinger put in. I believe in June of 2018, Barrett, who was a good friend of Alec's, a lot closer to me. I think they were, in my perception, very close friends. But I had become friends with him and had done a couple of real estate transactions with him. That summer, I received a call from his son-in-law. Barrett was in the Mayo Clinic with stage 4 colon cancer.
Objection is overruled.
I do know for a fact that he was in the Mayo Clinic suffering, being treated for stage 4 colon cancer. And I received a call as to whether I could help Barrett financially.
Your Honor, hearsay, a call.
Objection's overruled.
Because his wife did not have enough money to stay. Barrett had some waterfront lots.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. All this material came from somebody else.
The objection overruled.
I do know this from firsthand knowledge, Mr. Waters. I had already bought a lot from him, but anyway, he had a lot that he asked if I would buy so that they would have money to be able to, for his wife to stay down in Jacksonville while he was receiving cancer treatments. And I had a conversation with Alec about that.
Tell us about the conversation you had with Alec about that, please.
I just told him, man, it's bad. You know, Barrett's looks like he's going to die. And he did die in September of that year. And he acknowledged it, and he said that it was good what I was doing for Barrett, because he knew that he was in bad financial shape and obviously bad health.
And you're obviously a member of this law firm, and your review of the records as all of this came to light, did that conversation take place around the time that the defendant was stealing some of Barrett's money?
Yes, through this investigation that y'all have heard about into the financial stuff starting in early September of 2021, we started going through a lot of files, and as part of that process, somewhere I determined that in June of 2018, I believe, and I can't tell you the exact figure, but I believe it was a $70-something thousand insurance check that came to the firm on behalf of Mr. Boulware that didn't go through the firm. It was just Alec took it that same month that we had that conversation. And then later there was some more money taken after he died.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 575. States 575, see if you recognize that.
Is that David? Is that one of the sled agents?
Do you not recognize him?
Is that David Williams?
Well, I'm asking you.
I believe that's David Williams.
Okay. Your Honor, this time I'd offer States 575 in the evidence.
Objection, relevance.
What is the relevance?
Your Honor, the defendant specifically testified that when he had that initial interview with David Owen on June 8th, as he manufactured his decision to lie about such a crucial fact, it was because he thought that David Williams was the guy interviewing him. This is simply a picture of David Williams. The jury can assess the legitimacy of that claim.
Your Honor, I object. Never, ever said David Williams. He said David. That's the record. He never said it was that guy.
It's admitted over objection.
Can I have the element, please? All right. That's who you recognize as David Williams?
Yes, I didn't know him. I got to know him through this investigation, and I do believe he was the agent that was involved in the case with Chief Greg Alexander that was referenced.
Clearly not David Owen, though, correct?
Well, that's not David Owen.
Have you ever tried cases with Alec?
I handled a lot of cases with Alec. I believe the only case I tried to jury with Alec was actually here in this courtroom.
Did you observe him being able to get emotional during that closing argument?
Yes, as a couple months ago when we talked and you asked me what kind of lawyer Alec was, and I told you he was a good lawyer, and one of the things that I think I explained to you was that he was a theatrical type presence in the courtroom, and he could get very emotional doing closing arguments in front of a jury.
Thank you. Please answer any questions the defense may have.
I hate to go here, but let's talk about hog hunting, which I know nothing about, okay?
You might not want to go there then.
I've been here so long, I think I probably do need to learn how to hog hunt. But I guess my first question is this. Did you ever ride Moselle with Alec? Did you ride around Moselle with Alec?
Probably, I know I dove hunted there, so I believe I rode on a Ranger, but I don't ever remember doing much riding with Alec at Moselle. But I know I dove hunted there, and sure, I rode in a Ranger or some type of ATV with Alec, but I don't have a specific.
When you're riding around dove hunting, you got a gun with you, right?
You would?
Would you take a shotgun to hunt dove?
Yes.
Would you take an AR weapon too?
No.
Why? I mean, them hogs are out there, right?
Well, they don't usually come in a dove field when you're shooting dove. So
Well-
I don't know. You just wouldn't, Mr. Harpootlian, typically. I mean,
But daytime, you're riding around the property, you got a shotgun. You got a slug in that shotgun or you using bird shot?
you would shoot birdshot.
Okay. So if a hog came up, nothing you could do.
If a hog came into a dove field with a bunch of dove hunters,
Well, maybe
they
you're
would
on your
shoot
way-
at him regardless.
Maybe you're on your way to the dove field. The dove field's not right next to the house, is it?
Yes, it's right within a few hundred yards.
Bordered by the swamp?
The swamp's on one end of it, yeah.
Okay. And where do the hogs live during the day primarily?
Well, they can live in the swamp, they can live in a bay, it could be anywhere, but largely in the swamp.
The swamp. So a hog could have come out of that swamp
Yes.
and you were unarmed.
As I said, if a hog came in a dove field near somebody dove hunting, they would probably shot it with birdshot.
Would that kill a hog?
If it was close enough, but unlikely.
But unlikely. So you have, in fact, ridden around Moselle without a gun to kill a hog, appropriate gun to kill a hog.
Well, yes, if I was going over to the dove field, I wouldn't have one.
But you've never ridden as Paul and Alec did that afternoon, just looking at different, like where deer, what do they call them? Where they plant stuff for deer?
Food plots?
Yeah. Or looking around at how these fruit trees were doing. Remember the Snapchat video?
I've never done that with Alec, and that I recall, but I could have in the past, but I don't have a specific recollection.
Or where they planted some corn for, I guess, use corn for deer and ducks?
You do, but you don't plant them in the same spot.
No, I get that. One would be near a pond or in a pond or around a pond,
Correct, they had a duck pond.
right? And then the others would just be out where the deer might come out and try to feed, right? Look, we don't need to go there.
Yeah, I don't think, yeah.
Okay, but you've never rode around like that with them, looking at different plantings and that you remember.
I don't have a specific recollection of doing that with Alex.
Okay, and would you're not telling this jury that they would do that without a blackout? Would it bother you or offend you or scare you that they're riding around the property during the daytime without the blackout?
No, I was answering questions about what's normal if you're looking for hogs or if we're just riding my property. Most people carry a gun, but no, I have no idea what they had with them or what they were doing.
And I think Alec testified they were looking for signs of hogs because you could come back. It'd be a lot easier to find those hogs at night, right? They come out more likely at night than they do during the day.
They can become nocturnal when they have a lot of pressure, but as I said before, we've shot a lot of hogs in the daytime. You
Sure.
can ride up on them and yeah.
But has anybody testified they were out looking to shoot hogs that afternoon?
I don't know what all the testimony's been in this
Okay.
trial.
All I'm saying is there seems to be some implication they would not ride around the property without an AR or some sort of blackout. You can't testify to that, right?
I cannot.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what you heard from Alec the night of June 7th. you would agree with me that, well, let's ask it this way. What your practice is primarily personal injury, is that correct?
It is.
Catastrophic injuries.
Well, I handle a lot of catastrophic injury cases.
Cases, for instance, where a husband and wife are riding down the road and hit by a tractor trailer. And by way of example, maybe you could give me something more specific. Husband's killed, wife's severely injured. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now, is it your experience in people who undergo, maybe they're not hurt, but their loved one is hurt, maybe killed? In that situation, that's a traumatic experience for the surviving person, correct? To see their loved one killed?
Yes.
Okay. And so when you sit down with those folks and begin to recount with them what happened that night, oftentimes, I do a little work like you do, oftentimes those folks misremember or get times wrong, or because they went through this very traumatic experience, and the closer to that experience, the more likely they are to get some things wrong. Times, for instance. Is that your experience?
They can, but I also find that people who have been involved in traumatic experiences try to be very accurate with the details because they know it's important to me representing them.
And typically, you don't go out to the scene of the crime and interview, or the scene of the accident and interview them that night, do you? Typically?
Well, typically you don't because you don't know it. It's happened.
Well, sometimes in the old days they used to do that, but they don't do that anymore, right?
That would be very rare.
So you're seeing them in your office weeks later?
It can be days, can be weeks.
Okay. And in that atmosphere, it's a little more conducive to them being as accurate as possible, right?
It is, but oftentimes we also have the benefit of recorded interviews when there's a catastrophic injury. Typically, the highway patrol will try to interview people as quickly as they can, and they will. We oftentimes have it on video off a dash cam or sometimes body cam, but and a lot of times written statements.
And written statements from witnesses who saw it happen.
Correct.
And so when you interview those people, they have the benefit of reviewing whatever you have to help them get a better recollection of what happened, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the instance you're talking about where Alec told you he turned him over before he made the 911 call, whatever it was, I'm not quite sure. Before, I think is what you said. If that would be inconsistent with something he says later on, after having reviewed other people's statements, looking at video, that would not be unusual in your business. I think you just said it would not be unusual, correct? Strike that.
You're trying to take me somewhere that you probably don't want to.
Oh, no, I think I want to.
Answer the question.
Withdraw the question. Let me ask you this question. Maybe let's get to the meat of matter here. Have you had to come out of pocket to pay back the money he stole?
Yes, and if you,
How much? Don't tell me you don't know.
well, we're still counting, Mr. Hart-Bootley.
Well, how much have you paid so far?
We have had to borrow millions to pay back.
No, how much have you had to come out of pocket?
Well, when you borrow it, you got to pay it back, and I couldn't tell you how much has exactly been paid back as of we sit here today. But
10
yes, and if you're implying that I would come in here and somehow shade truth in any way because of that, I would take high offense with that, Mr.
I'm not
Hart-Bootley.
concerned about your high offense. Are you angry at him for stealing your money?
I have no feeling one way or the
I
other.
don't have any feeling about Alec Murdaugh betraying you and stealing your money. I admire you. I don't know that I could look beyond that.
Objection, Your Honor.
It's sustained. It's not a question. The jury is to disregard the argument.
You are not angry with Alec Murdaugh?
I have had anger with him, extreme anger, Mr. Hart-Pootlin, because of what he did to my law firm, my partners, my client, his clients, our clients, what he did to his family. what he's did to so many people, yes, I experienced a lot of anger.
And
But
that
you
anger
can't
goes-
walk around with anger. You have to find a way to deal with it and move forward. And I have done that. And if you suggest, you are dead wrong. If you think I've come in here and told this jury something because of money, when we're talking about two people who were brutally murdered, then you're headed in the wrong direction.
Do you think he did it?
I don't have an opinion. I don't have the benefit of the materials you have.
Well, let me ask you this. You're angry with him, stole millions of dollars from your firm. You admit your firm's not even called the Murdaugh firm anymore, right?
It is not. I don't admit that I'm angry right now. I told you I've gotten away from that. I don't have any feelings because you can't walk around with anger. I have been very, very angry about it because of what he's done. And he did it in a very callous way, a very deceitful way.
And you carry I'm sorry, maybe I just saw some anger there. Were you angry just a moment ago?
No, you keep trying to push a question and don't want to accept my answer, which is what it is.
That you've just given your Zen, your Nirvana, your whatever the.
Your Honor, objection.
Are you
Mr. Harpootlian,
forgiving him?
I came to the scene of these murders to support my partner. I was there. I saw things that hadn't even been talked about in this courtroom. I was there. I love Paul very much. I thought I knew who Alec was. I did not. And it's hard to you might not understand, but it's hard to walk around with anger, and hard to even walk around with it when it's with somebody who you didn't know and didn't understand. So you might have be that way, but I've got to function. I've got a family. I got to move on with life.
Were you aware that he went to rehab in 2017?
I was not,
Really?
other than what was said by Alec in this courtroom.
You never were aware he had a drug problem?
I was unaware.
Okay. Sort of.
And if I would have been known, I would have tried to help him.
You indicated that he could be emotional in trying a case, correct?
He could be. He was theatric, much like his father and grandfather had a courtroom theatrics, and he could be emotional.
Any of your other partners that way? Johnny Parker?
No, Johnny's quite the opposite. Johnny's very,
Laconic, I believe is the best way to describe it.
he doesn't show emotion.
Nobody else in your firm is theatric or emotional?
Not to Alec's level.
You don't know any other lawyers in the state that go to that level?
You're asking me a question right now. I don't know. You might yourself. I don't know. I don't know what other lawyers do. I'm usually trying cases against defense attorneys, so I don't get to see plaintiffs' lawyers anymore.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for. Well, let me ask you one last thing. This Bullware guy that he stole all the money from, Mr. Bullware, remember him?
Yes, I remember him.
How much money did you steal from him? Do you remember?
He stole 70-something thousand in June of 2018. Mr. Bulwer died in September, I believe, of 2018, and I believe another 270-something thousand after Mr. Bulwer's death sometime in around February of 2019.
Have you and your partners paid Mr. Bullware's estate or his folks back?
Yes, I met with them personally.
Okay. And even though it's cost you your firm and it's cost millions of dollars to you, you have forgiven him? You bear him no ill?
I didn't say I forgave him.
You're just not angry about it anymore.
I said I have no feelings. And I had to work on that, Mr. Harpootlian. When you go through what we've gone through, not only the trauma of losing people we loved in a double homicide, seeing the aftermath, and then learning that someone you worked with for more than 20 years had been stealing throughout a period of time and deceiving us, there's a lot of emotion there. And yes, it was bad in the fall of 2021, and I have found a way to have no feelings. It's not forgiveness, it's just I don't have
You're not
any
angry
feelings.
here today. You're not angry at him at all.
I'm not angry.
Okay.
If I raise my voice, it's only because of the implication that you were trying to
The
make out of it.
implication that you might not want to help him in front of this jury here today because, let me finish the question, because he destroyed your firm. He stole millions of dollars you had to pay back. He deceived you. All that's away and is not influencing your testimony here today at all. If you'd answer that yes or no, then you can explain.
All those things happened, and it does not influence my testimony. I take the oath that I just took very seriously. And if you got any indication that anything I said was inaccurate, I'll be glad to address it with you.
Well, the jury can judge that. Thank you.
How long did you know Alec?
Since the late 90s.
And knowing what you know now, was he able to look you in your eye and lie convincing to you day in and day out?
He did.
And was he able to look juries in the eye and display emotion?
Objection, Your Honor. That is not appropriate redirect, and it's leading.
The objection is sustained.
Mr. Harpootlian asked you about some of the things that you have gone through. And is your issue with Mr. Harpootlian's questioning the implication that you would come in and shade things in front of this jury?
Objection, leading.
What is your concern with Mr. Harpootlian's questioning of you? Can you express that to the jury, please? All that he just went through with you, sitting up on the stand, having to deal with this, what is your problem with what he was trying to say?
Well, I fortunately, to start with, I took an oath to tell the truth. But we as lawyers also have oaths and obligations to a court. And it goes a lot deeper than just that oath. We are bound by rules of professional conduct, ethical rules that I take very seriously as a lawyer. To my knowledge, I enjoy a very good reputation as far as being a person of integrity. And that's what I took issue with, is him attempting, because he cannot impugn my integrity.
That's fair. Would you take a 22 if you went out looking for hogs?
Possibly a .22 Magnum, which is a long rifle.
Which is a long rifle?
Yes.
You take a long rifle, not a pistol, is that correct?
Yeah, I would never, I'm not a good shot with a pistol, but I would never take a pistol.
And what was Paul's favorite gun for shooting hogs with?
I knew he always had a .300 Blackout, but I don't know if he shot him with anything else.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything further?
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I just can't leave this alone. Is the .300 Blackout that's in evidence his favorite? The .300 Blackout with a thermal scope on it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Next step down. We'll call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Dr. Reamer.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Can you have a seat on the witness stand? You will state your full name again, please, and spell your last name for the record.
Yes. It's Dr. Ellen Reamer, R-I-E-M-E-R.
And just to advise the gallery, if everybody could seal the monitors, please, and the media be advised of that. Dr. Reamer, I want to move through this. Yes. And Dr. Reamer, I don't know if I'm necessarily even going to put them up on the screen. I am going to show you some images. I know the jury have seen these. I don't want to belabor the point. I want to move quickly. But just very quickly, you've been previously qualified as an expert in this trial in forensic pathology. Is that correct?
Yes,
And you've done how many autopsies? Remind the jury, please.
around 5,500. Since I was last here, I've done a few more.
Excuse me. I can't see a monitor anymore.
I haven't put anything up yet. You actually conducted the autopsies of Paul and Maggie in this case?
Yes, I did both of the autopsies at the request of the Colleton County coroner, who called MUSC Forensic Pathology, requesting autopsies on 2 individuals that died under his jurisdiction. I was not asked by the prosecution to perform an autopsy. It was an independent autopsy.
Your autopsy is independent. You're not hired by prosecution or law enforcement or anything
No,
like
it's
that?
just at the request of the coroner.
All right. You've had a chance to hear the testimony of the pathologist for the defense that testified yesterday?
Yes,
All right. I want to ask you a couple of general questions and then move specifically to some of the conclusions that individual reached. But just very quickly, with skin tags, can you tell me the reliability of that in determining directionality just as a general matter?
yeah. Well, we look at these things, but just like every other thing at, finding at the autopsy, we take it in the context. So sometimes skin tags support your findings, and sometimes they're not really so reliable. So, skin tags don't tell you necessarily the direction of a wound, especially going through very soft tissue.
And I'm going to show you a couple of exhibits that have been previously introduced in this particular case. I'm going to try to be very careful with these. I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibits, defense exhibits, 159, 160, and 161. And if you could take those out and just tell me if you recognize those, and then please be mindful of the direction in which those images are presented. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yes, I've seen these.
All right. And what are those images of?
They're autopsy photographs of Maggie.
All right. You heard the testimony of the defense pathologist who testified yesterday that the directionality of the injury to the side of Maggie's head with the associated injury to the breast and the abrasion actually was coming from the top down as opposed, and I say top down as if somebody's standing upright, as opposed from going towards the bottom of the body up, correct?
Yes, that's
All
what I
right.
said.
And can you please look at the images that you have and explain to the jury your conclusions and why that defense pathologist is incorrect, who didn't conduct the autopsy to begin with, why he's incorrect?
Okay. Well, do you want me to show the photos?
You can, and let's just go ahead and put them both up on the screen. So I'll take them. If you could step down, please, if that's okay with your arm. And first, I'm going to show defense exhibit 160. Are we secure? We good? All right. All right, and that's defense 160. And Dr. Reamer, if you can again explain to me your specific findings and how they relate to the testimony from yesterday.
So we have the abrasion on the left shoulder, clavicle area, and then we have a defect in this left side of the face. We can see a hole there. It's a hole. And there was a defect in the left temporal lobe of the brain, which was included in my autopsy report. That could only have happened from that being an entrance wound.
Okay. And you mentioned during your testimony the concept of a diastatic fracture. Does that in any way relate to your conclusion in this regard?
Yeah, well, a diastatic fracture is when there's a separation of skull bones along suture lines which solidify during childhood. And usually it takes a lot of intracranial pressure to fracture a skull along the suture line.
All right. And does that relate to the conclusion that this had to be an entry wound?
Yeah, well, that's a finding. That doesn't prove that this is an entrance wound, but what I do, I have a path through the left temporal lobe, and there's, that it was associated with the diastatic fracture because of the increased pressure.
All right. And one of the things you're telling this jury is you who actually,
Objection waiting.
were you actually able to observe a hole associated with an entry wound when you physically performed this autopsy?
Yes, I physically performed the autopsy, and the way I determine direction is I have a hole below the left ear, which went into the brain, and so that's not going to happen in the opposite direction. And I understand that people can look at pictures, that's like a two-dimensional view, but doing the autopsy makes certain information available to the pathologist that is not available to an individual not performing the autopsy. And I had that information in my report, which was not, which was, I guess, overlooked.
Overlooked by the defense
Right.
pathologist.
Yes, I'm sure.
All right. I'm going to show you now Defense Exhibit 161. And there was some testimony from the defense pathologist about trying to determine directionality from this particular image. And can you please tell the jury why that pathologist is wrong?
All right. Well, when we have tears of the skin, and this is a lot of tears of the subcutaneous tissue, especially in the very soft area of the body where there's a lot of fat, there's a lot of stretching, and it doesn't necessarily, we can move the tissue of the breast, and sort of, you can even get the points to go into a different direction. This is not very impressive. It's not even really worth observing any of the skin tags. It's really very non-specific, and I think he has a very good imagination for seeing that in this way. And it's, skin tags can be there. Sometimes they support your findings, sometimes they don't support, but they don't take the place of determining the path of the wound by actually following it through the body.
I'm going to show you finally what's been marked as Defense 159. And is this also a representation, sort of the hole that you determined and were able to physically observe as a entrance wound on the side of Maggie's head?
Yes.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Paul. And you heard the defense pathologist and their subsequent expert talk about there being a contact wound to the top of Paul's head. Is that correct?
That's what he said.
All right. And you, of course, have already testified during your direct testimony that there was no way for this to be a contact wound, but now you have specific observations about the defense
Yes.
conclusions.
Well, I didn't think it was necessary for me to point out every physical feature of the wound that demonstrates that the entrance was to the top of the left shoulder and then went into the left side of the head before exiting the top of the head. Now, before I go on, I do want to say that I agree with the book that keeps being brought up, that when there is a contact shotgun wound to the head, there's massive gas expansion within the cranial cavity, within the skull. And what that does, it doesn't just create a hole with some, bones I understand this was like the most severe thing you have ever seen. And you probably can't imagine that the damage to the head could be any worse. But a contact shotgun wound to the head with the associated gas expansion to the skull would not have, his face was basically intact. We would have had tears of the skin, and his eyes would have been either displaced from the orbital bones. The orbital bones were intact. Anytime there's massive gas buildup within the cranial cavity from a contact shotgun wound to the head, which the book does say is when we have the worst gas expansion, the entire face, he would have not even had a face left. I mean, I know what you saw was awful, and it was absolutely awful, but the damage would have been a lot worse. He would have had, like, the sides of his head would have down, he would have had, his entire face would have been split open, because there's no way all of that gas expansion could occur and not cause fractures of these delicate bones in the face. His forehead was even still there. So, I agree with the book that a contact shotgun wound would cause severe gas expansion and damage to the head. What we have here is not consistent with a contact shotgun wound to the head. The damage to the head would have been much worse, even though this was already horrible. Okay, that being said, there are photographs. Okay.
Yep, and I'm going to put up what's already been admitted into evidence as States 486. And if you could, Doctor, just talk a little bit about this image as it illustrates what you're talking about with the face, but also, if you could, we'll go ahead and talk about with the face, and then I want to talk about the shoulder a little bit as well.
There's no skin, like, torn apart of his face. His eyes are still in the correct locations. It's hard to imagine that, anything could be worse than a hole at the top right side of the back of the head. But in my 20 plus years of experience doing autopsies and seeing contact shotgun wounds to the head, which are associated with massive gas expansion in the skull, this entire face, he would have had tears. The eyes would have been either hanging down or lost, blown out. There's no way that these features are consistent with a contact shotgun wound to the head.
All right. Now, there was some discussion by the defense pathologist about shaving the top of the head for stippling or checking for stippling. And can you comment on the necessity of that in your actual autopsy that you conducted?
Okay. So, he also said that sometimes we actually don't see the soot. Like he said, if Dr. Lima shaved the area, she would have had the opportunity to see the soot. So suppose I didn't see soot, or I did see soot. First of all, I'm confident there would not have been soot, because the features of this wound are not consistent with a shotgun wound to that location. First of all, the damage to the head and face would have been far more severe than it was. And then also the wounds to the shoulder and left side of the cheek have all the features of entrance wounds.
Right. And one of the things discussed by the defense experts was sort of the large sort of oblong shape of the shoulder. Can you explain how that does not contradict your findings of that shot coming this way, that we see this injury here? And I'm going to actually put up Defense Exhibit 162 to illustrate what we're talking about.
All right. Well, so we've got basically an oblong wound here, and that's because the wound is entering at an angle along the top of the shoulder. It's not hitting the shoulder at a perpendicular angle. So it's kind of grazing along the top of the shoulder. Okay, now is this, okay. So, and actually, he said that the pellets are going down. Okay, well, if you look at it as an entrance wound, they're actually going up. So it depends where you're looking at it from. If he's thinking that this is an exit wound, that this is, that the end of the wound path, then it would look to him as if the pellets are going down. But we can see this is actually an entrance wound for a few reasons. First of all, if it were an exit wound, do you remember all those pellet exit wounds on Paul's left arm that came from the chest, the pellets are not just going to stop in the shoulder. There's like no resistance there. The pellets are going to continue going until they exit the left side of the arm. Okay, so they don't just stop there. The reason they're there is that's because they started there. Okay. In addition, you see all of this white material here on the edge of the entrance wound. That's styrofoam packing material that's between the pellets. So the pellets are contained within wadding, and there's styrofoam packing material between. And that would never have been deposited there. So I did not think it was net when I was telling you the direction, my determination of the direction of this wound. I did not have to necessarily, it was my expert, I'm expert at determining, forensic pathology includes establishing the direction of wounds. And because of all of these things, this was my determination. Okay, now there's another feature of this photograph. Do you see that this is coming into the left side of the, this is what I determined, left side of the cheek, and we've got all sorts of abrasions around here. Now, it doesn't have the classic, what we saw on Paul's chest had those little petals. So we knew that the wadding was starting to open up. But in this case, there was wadding that was probably open as well. So we have some pellets already starting to come out. It's not entering within the wadding, but the wadding is going along and entering them. And we have all this abrasion around the left side of the cheek, the chin neck area. And that's consistent with, we're not going to have that abrasion if it's coming out. If it's going to push the skin out, we're not going to have an abrasion. So, all that but even just common sense, we have that styrofoam packing material on the outside of the arm. My determination, this went up through the left cheek, out the right side of the top of the head. If it were a shotgun entrance wound, contact to the head, I don't care whether, there's no way his entire facial bones and skin, his ears would have been flopped down. There's so much gas expansion that the damage to his head would have been much worse. So that's based on my experience for doing this. And, I just don't know how, I didn't mention that styrofoam packing, but that's from when the pellets are coming in. And he said, oh, you can see they're going down. That's because he's looking from above. So but if you look at where I believe and I determined by doing this autopsy that the entrance wound is, it's actually going up. So it depends which side of the pellets you're looking at. And if just logically, if this was an exit, the pellets wouldn't have just stopped there. They've got a huge amount of energy. They're going to continue through the arm and have individual pellets. They wouldn't have all just been concentrated right there. So, we can use our powers of logic, which I think, we all have, to understand how this is an entrance wound that exited the right side of the top of the head.
Dr. Reamer, having specifically, and you can take a seat now, thank you very much. Having specifically addressed the specific criticisms of the defense pathologist, in your expert opinion, having actually done the autopsies in this case, is there any way that could have been a contact wound to the top of the head?
No.
All right. And having addressed the specific concerns of and testimony of the defense pathologist as it relates to Maggie, is your conclusion still that the shot went in the direction as you described before this?
Yes, I disagree with his conclusions.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Reamer. Please answer any questions the defense counsel may have.
Dr. Reamer, good to see you again.
Hello.
So, You took pictures, correct?
I took pictures. I wish I took more pictures now, but I took
I'm sorry-
pictures.
I'm sorry, what?
Yes, I would have, I wish I took more, even more pictures.
So do we. So, you made notes, which you converted into an autopsy
Yeah,
report.
it's a standard operating
Yeah,
procedure.
no. But so, and that's done so that somebody else can look at your work and see if they agree or disagree with you, because.
No, the notes are a work product for me while I'm preparing, doing my examination. I don't always, I take notes, I write numbers, but that is really for me so I can incorporate findings into an autopsy report that I'm going to write. And I don't write it the same while I'm at the table. I need to go away. Maybe I'm going to do it the next day, that night. So, but it's not done. People say, oh, can I have a copy of the autopsy diagram? Well, these are not autopsy diagrams that are meant for other people to look at. And sometimes they're not even completely accurate because I mark things on the outside of the body that later on during the course of the autopsy, I determine, I'm like, oh, well, that's what that is. And it may not be what I initially wrote down. But by the time the autopsy's over, I've put it all together. And that a diagram or notes do not necessarily reflect everything, that I concluded.
Do you still have your notes in this case?
I imagine they would be in the file, but as I told you, my notes are not necessarily the conclusion that I came to.
Did you produce them to the state?
I don't know what I did. I personally, yeah, if they were asked for, I'm sure I did.
Did you produce them to us?
No, I don't remember producing them at all. I don't have a request for those notes in my file.
But those notes would be your present sense impression as you're doing the autopsy, correct?
Well, they can have a lot of things written down on them.
But we don't know because we didn't get them, right?
Well, they're not important. What's important is they're my notes. They're for me. They're an aid to the pathologist. So even if I thought something initially, and then while I do the autopsy, by the time I get to the end, it could disagree. I don't necessarily go back and change the diagram. It's my work product. It's for me to aid me in writing my autopsy report. It's not for public view. It's not a statement of my conclusions.
Okay. Did you review those notes before your testimony previously or today?
No.
Okay, so you just go with your report.
Well, I reviewed my report, correct?
Right, but you don't go back and look at your notes.
No.
So let me ask you some basic questions here. You've previously testified that the muzzle of the shotgun for this wound here that goes through his neck and out the top of his head was about 3 feet away.
That would be about right.
Okay. Now, you're familiar with this page from, I believe you've described.
Oh, yes, I've seen it many times.
Okay. And as you see, the gas comes out, right? In the first shot, the top
Yes.
shot. And then actually there's sort of a blowback of gas as as we can see right here, the projectile, which is the pellets, are extruded from the barrel, right? I mean, the gas pushes the pellets out.
Well, there's gas expansion, and that helps propel the pellets. Yes, I agree with the book. This was not a contact shotgun wound to the top of the head.
Okay, well, the book doesn't say that. But what the book does say is that as the pellets come out, at some point they begin to, the container opens and the pellets expand or move out in a pattern, a circular pattern. It becomes bigger as the further away you get, correct?
Yes, and that's what we have here.
Okay,
But this is actually demonstrating specifically a contact shotgun wound to head. But we do have splaying outward of the pellets. We can see on the left shoulder, they're fairly clustered together because they're first starting to be released from the wadding. And they did spread out. We have some of them down in the neck, some of them in the brain, And so they are spreading out. I don't see how, yes, it's a respected treatise, but this is specific to a contact shotgun wound to head.
This
This
is?
is what this is describing.
Really?
Well, it's fine, it doesn't matter. I can look at my photos. I can look, if you're going to talk about theory, the
Doctor,
photos.
Doctor, Your Honor, I would ask you
complete his
to
answer.
tell the witness to be responsive. She is going on a diatribe. Excuse me. I'm asking the court to instruct her to answer the question as specifically as she can. She goes off on tangents and I'm sorry.
Prilly, you may continue answering the question.
You remember what the question was?
No, that's your question.
Is this series of shots from the book depicting a contact wound? I think that's what I understand.
Yes.
You said. Yes. Okay. So where, if you step down here, show me please where the contact is with the body or the head. Here, let me give you this pointer.
Well, the contact would be at the first area.
Right here?
Yes.
Well, what's it contacting?
It's not, it's just a theoretical depiction. It's a theoretical.
Is that what the book
depiction.
says?
Yeah. Well, go ahead. I don't recall the exact. Why don't you read it to me?
Well, why don't you tell me, is that a contact wound?
I don't know what this is. This is.
That's a shotgun.
That's a shotgun.
That's a shotgun being fired. Those are the pellets coming out.
Object
Those are the
counsel
pellets.
testify.
Yeah, I think, this is a book, showing the series of steps after a shotgun is fired.
If
But
this-
it has nothing to do with what I found in the body and does not help me determine the direction of the wound.
All right.
And
So,
I'm not going to describe to you, you can read it in the book. I don't remember how he says all of this.
the book isn't testifying. You are. If you've testified, that depicts a contact wound. Yes?
Well, I don't know what this is depicting. It could be that this is a contact wound. I don't know where you're going.
Where's I'm going? Is that barrel in contact with anything?
It's not in contact with anything. It looks like it's just blown into the air.
Okay. And you've been, that's fine. And your testimony is that barrel is at least 3 feet away from Paul's shoulder. Is that correct?
It could be, depending on the weapon, it could be, it's not closer than 2 feet because we don't have the sibling. But we
No
do
sibling.
have packing material.
Okay. So as we see here, these pellets are beginning to separate. Is it your testimony that those pellets had separated when they hit Paul's shoulder at all?
They are starting to separate. We don't have the complete, widening of it. They're still relatively clustered together, but they're not as close as they would be if they were still contained within the widening.
Okay. Now, at 2 feet, is there any gas left or is it all dissipated like this picture shows?
Well, what we have here, if there was more gas, if there was a contact wound to here,
It's not a contact.
I understand. The gas, you're wanting me to say yes or no, and
Yes
I
or no.
can't because I have the knowledge to explain how this relates to examining the body.
Okay,
I don't give theoretical talks or I don't start looking up in this book while I'm doing an autopsy. I use my practical reasoning and my experience and knowledge of things.
If there'd been gas in the wound or when it hit his shoulder or his neck, would you expect to find some physical manifestation of that?
Well, there would have been, a lot more expansion, shoulder expansion. This was fairly contained on the
So
left shoulder.
your testimony is there would have been little or no gas going to his shoulder, to his neck.
Well, there is always some gas, but it's not the kind of gas that we get in a contact shotgun.
Exactly. So, and you can go ahead and take a stand again, please. Sorry, it's going to take a minute to get, no, not that one. Paul. Paul Williams family?
I don't remember the number off the top of my head. It'll be over there somewhere. 160 something, I think.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have you go to the jury room for a break. Please do not discuss the case. Step down, please do not discuss your testimony with anyone. It'll take about 10 minutes.
All right, welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. So we've had quite an interesting day in the Alec Murdaugh murder trial as the state continues on with the rebuttal case. This is their response to the defense. And there was one heated moment we want to talk about because right now the court is, there's a break right now, there's a recess. So as soon as we can jump back live, we will. But I want to talk about this moment that was quite heated, and it was between Dick Harpootlian, who was representing Alec Murdaugh, the man accused of killing his wife and son, and Ronnie Crosby. Ronnie Crosby used to be a law firm partner with Alec Murdaugh. He had testified for the prosecution as part of the financial crimes evidence. The idea there that Alec Murdaugh killed his family because all of his alleged financial crimes were about to be exposed, killed his family as a way to buy himself some time, to have the inquiry stop. Well, under cross-examination, I should tell you, he was called as a rebuttal witness to try to suggest that certain things Alec Murdaugh was saying on the stand weren't true. Well, Dick Harpootlian suggested maybe his testimony is biased and it's a little bit shaded by his anger towards Alec Murdaugh. Take a look at this back and forth.
Let me ask you this question. Maybe let's get to the meat of matter here. Have you had to come out of pocket to pay back the money he stole?
Yes, and if you,
How much? Don't tell me you don't know.
well, we're still counting, Mr. Harpootlian.
Well, how much have you paid so far?
We have had to borrow millions to pay back.
No, how much have you had to come out of pocket?
Well, when you borrow it, you got to pay it back, and I couldn't tell you how much has exactly been paid back as of we sit here today. But yes, and if you're implying that I would come in here and somehow shade truth in any way because of that, I would take high offense with that, Mr.
I'm not concerned
Harpootlian.
about your high offense. Are you angry at him for stealing your money?
I have no feeling one way or the
I
other.
don't have any feeling about Alec Murdaugh betraying you and stealing your money. I admire you. I don't know that I can look beyond that.
Objection, Your Honor.
It's sustained. There's not a question. Jury is to disregard the argument.
You are not angry with Alec Murdaugh?
I have had anger with him, extreme anger, Mr. Harpootlian, because of what he did to my law firm, my partners, my client, his clients, our clients, what he did to his family, what he's did to so many people. Yes, I experienced a lot of anger, but you can't walk around with anger. You have to find a way to deal with it and move forward. And I have done that. And if you suggest, you are dead wrong if you think I've come in here and told this jury something because of money. When we're talking about two people who were brutally murdered, then you're headed in the wrong direction.
Do you think he did it?
I don't have an opinion. I don't have the benefit of the materials you have.
Well, let me ask you this. You're angry with him, stole millions of dollars from your firm. You admit your firm's not even called the Murdaugh firm anymore, right?
It is not. I don't admit that I'm angry right now. I told you I've gotten away from that. I don't have any feelings because you can't walk around with anger. I have been very, very angry about it because of what he's done. And he did it in a very callous way, a very deceitful way.
And you carry I'm sorry, maybe I just saw some anger there. Were you angry just a moment ago?
No, you keep trying to push a question and don't want to accept my answer, which is what it is.
That you've just given your Zen, your Nirvana, your whatever the.
Your Honor, objection.
Are you
Mr. Harpootlian,
forgiving him?
I came to the scene of these murders to support my partner. I was there. I saw things that hadn't even been talked about in this courtroom. I was there. I love Paul very much. I thought I knew who Alec was. I did not. And it's hard to you might not understand, but it's hard to walk around with anger, and hard to even walk around with it when it's with somebody who you didn't know and didn't understand. So you might have be that way, but I've got to function. I've got a family. I got to move on with life.
Were you aware that he went to rehab in 2017?
I was not,
Really?
other than what was said by Alec in this courtroom.
You never were aware he had a drug problem?
I was unaware.
Okay. Sort of.
And if I would have been known, I would have tried to help him.
You indicated that he could be emotional in trying a case, correct?
He could be. He was theatric, much like his father and grandfather had a courtroom theatrics, and he could be emotional.
Any of your other partners that way? Johnny Parker?
No, Johnny's quite the opposite. Johnny's very
Laconic, I believe is the best way to
yeah.
describe it.
He doesn't show emotion.
Nobody else in your firm was theatric or emotional?
Not to Alec's level.
You don't know any other lawyers in the state that go to that level?
You're asking me a question right now. I don't know. You might yourself. I don't know. I don't know what other lawyers do. I'm usually trying cases against defense attorneys, so I don't get to see plaintiffs' lawyers anymore.
Now, I'm glad we were able to show you that because a big portion of it, we were actually in a commercial break, but now we have time to analyze it. I'm here with criminal defense attorney Duncan Levin. I'm also joined by law enforcement instructor Sonny Slaughter. Duncan, defense attorneys, even prosecutors push the buttons of witnesses to try to elicit a response. Who won that exchange?
Oh, I mean, Ronnie Crosby is a phenomenal lawyer. He's brilliant. His reputation is really just untouched. And I have to say, this is what happens when a defense attorney tries to cross and tries to cross and tries to cross and doesn't get anywhere because he's going up against a really sharp attorney. Crosby is shooting him down. And frankly, I do think that it's a remarkable thing for Harpootlian to try to get Crosby to admit that he would come in here and lie because of the money that Alex Murdaugh stole. I mean, that is just a ridiculous premise. coming from Harpootlian. I think that at the end of the day, look, obviously he's angry. I think that Crosby comes in there and says, I'm not angry at all. That comes off a little bit, he says he's angry. He should own it. But at the same time, to accuse Crosby of coming in there and lying and because he's owed money is ridiculous. And I think it comes off that way. I thought Harpootlian just lost a lot of credibility on that whole exchange.
So, Sonny, I'll go to you. The substance of this is to suggest, and one of the things that they brought up, I thought this was so interesting. How do we know that Alec Murdaugh was telling the truth when he took the stand? I mean, this whole thing back and forth was about, was he being honest about what his activities were with Paul and hog hunting? But even more importantly, that Alec Murdaugh, as a trial attorney, would be able to seemingly turn on and turn off emotion when speaking to the jury. So now we're all left with the impression, all those tears that he was showing on the stand, was it real or was it manufactured? What do you think the jury might be thinking of that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that was what what Crosby was trying to get at. That really makes you think about whether how theatrical he could be at different times. And I think that point did get over during the questioning as to whether he was telling the truth or not. It is clear from all of the other evidence that Alex Murdaugh is a liar. Now we're hearing that he's very theatrical. He can turn it on, turn it off, kind of at a whim. So that does, taint him even more in that way. But I'm still not sure whether it gets him to being in that realm as the murderer of his wife and son. There's a lot of focus on Paul, not as much focus on Maggie and her injuries and murder. It's almost kind of dismissive, but he's a parent, he's a husband, but I'm just not sure whether that still connects the dots. And as you said earlier, whether if he shot Paul and all of that back spray on him, if that would be necessary, whether he could get that off or not. I'm just still not there yet.
Duncan, I will tell you my prediction, and I've been saying this over and over again. I think a hung jury. Do you think I'm totally off with that?
I think the trial has been so meandering for so long that it's just, it could take any amount of, one juror could just see it the other way. And frankly, I read a lot of people comments online about it. There are a lot of people out there who say they would vote to acquit having heard Murdaugh on the stand. I thought it was a train wreck. And so, I think all it takes is one juror to come away and say, you know what, I don't think he did it. Or look, I don't think the defense did a very good job at the end of this with advancing their two-shooter theory, that there was someone else involved. I don't think they've done a very good job of stepping through all of those landmines of all the financial crimes. I think it is absolutely true that you leave knowing that he's a liar. Whether he's a murderer is a different story. I could see it that way. I just don't think he's done himself any favors by testifying.
Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll see where this goes next. I'm keeping a careful eye on the courtroom feed because we are now continuing on with the prosecution's rebuttal case. Welcome back to Law and Crime. The jury is still taking their morning break in the Murdaugh family murder trial. This is the disgraced South Carolina attorney who's charged in the double murder of his wife and son. And as we wait for the ability to be able to jump back live, I'm keeping a careful eye on the courtroom feed. We want to go back to something that happened earlier today. And that is when the forensic pathologist who actually performed the autopsies on the victims took the stand again in the state's rebuttal case. And she said that the autopsies for Paul and Maggie shows that the defense's pathologist testimony is unreliable.
You actually conducted the autopsies of Paul and Maggie in this case?
Yes, I did both of the autopsies at the request of the Colleton County coroner, who called MUSC Forensic Pathology, requesting autopsies on 2 individuals that died under his jurisdiction. I was not asked by the prosecution to perform an autopsy. It was an independent autopsy.
Your autopsy is independent. You're not hired by the prosecution or law enforcement or anything
No,
like that?
it's just at the request of the coroner.
All right. You've had a chance to hear the testimony of the pathologist for the defense that testified yesterday?
Yes.
All right. I want to ask you a couple of general questions and then move specifically to some of the conclusions that individual reached. But just very quickly, with skin tags, can you tell me the reliability of that in determining directionality just as a general matter?
Yeah, well, we look at these things, but just like every other thing at, finding at the autopsy, we take it in the context. So sometimes skin tags support your findings, and sometimes they're not really so reliable. So, skin tags don't tell you necessarily the direction of a wound, especially going through very soft tissue.
Okay, so Duncan, again, we're kind of trying to understand this, and this is something that I thought, I would say, why should we listen to the defense's experts yesterday when Dr. Reamer seems incredibly, reliable and somebody who seems like we can trust? The only thing I will say is I think the defense has done a terrific job at showing extreme missteps by the police, showing deficits in the prosecution's case, that this may open up the jury to saying, you know what, should we really?
You may bring the jury.
Jury is present, sir.
All right, you may continue.
Oh, I know. I'm sorry. I got it right here. So these guys first. We have her idea. Doctor, I'd ask you to look at this photo and tell me if this is one of the photos from your autopsy.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I need. Thank you. Now I'd offer this defense exhibit number 195 into evidence, please.
No objection, Your Honor.
Admit it.
So can we put that up on the screen, please? Before I lose it, let me hand this to. Thank you. So, what are we looking at here?
Do you want me to come? Oh, here it is.
No, just tell me what it is.
Yeah, okay. So this is an entrance shotgun wound to the left shoulder area.
Okay, and you a moment ago said something about packing material. What is packing material?
Yes. So there's foam that is frequently between pellets.
I'm sorry, just a moment. You're on. I can't hear her because of the noise coming through the door. I apologize, but I just need to understand what she's saying. I apologize. May I begin?
Yes, sir.
Packing material. Let's start over again. Tell me again.
Yes. So it's frequently present in the wadding along with the pellets that sort of help keep them together.
Okay, so the wadding, you got the powder wadding shotgun pellets, and is it in the pellets or is it close to behind it in the wadding or?
It's within the wadding.
Okay, and you indicated you saw some packing material.
Well, that is very consistent with, with a little bit of packing material that would, as we have pellets going into the shoulder and some of the packing materials depositing on the skin.
And is this a picture of the packing material?
There is some of the white material, yes, on the skin. Correct.
Did you note that in your autopsy report?
No, it was just a general observation.
Okay. Is it important it was there?
It didn't matter to me whether it's there or not, but it does reinforce that it is an entrance wound.
But you concede it was not in your autopsy report.
Well, all the totality of my findings, I don't always write every little thing in my autopsy report. I could go on, that it could be 50 pages, an autopsy report. I include the findings, my determinations, and I could have mentioned it, but I did not.
And why not?
Because it's not always necessary to mention that kind of thing.
Is it evidence of anything?
Well, I do believe that supports an entrance wound, although I don't require myself to see it in order to make that determination.
But you agree with me, it supports your conclusion, correct?
Yes,
And you didn't put in your autopsy report.
that's correct.
Would it be in your notes?
No,
Okay. So, and could you step down here and show me what the packing material looks like? And there's a pointer right over there behind you. You probably want to stand over here so the jurors over there can see it.
yes. This is what I believe to be consistent with packing material.
And did you remove any of that to be analyzed or forensically examined?
No, I did not.
Okay, and while we're looking at this picture, you can actually see some shot in there, right?
Yes.
And that shot is that, that's pretty, that area right there is much wider than this entrance wound in his cheek, is it not?
Yes, this entrance wound is larger than this re-entrance wound here. And I believe I actually went over this last time. Frequently, there's enlargement of wound as it goes along. But in this case, we have a wound going along the top of the shoulder, so it's going to be oblong. As it enters the left neck area, it's entering more at a right angle, perpendicular to the jaw, so it's going to appear smaller. And that has nothing to do with spreading of pellets.
Okay, well, let's pursue that a little bit more. You see that pellet that's clear, clearly there. You
This
see,
pellet?
right, and then you see a pellet above it. You see that? Right.
Yeah.
Right Let me put my glasses on. Is that a pellet?
Yeah, it may be a pellet. yes.
Okay, so we have, if you step back just a little bit so this juror can see, we have pellets coming in like this, correct?
Well, they're kind of banging against each other. We have the wound tract is from left to right. And we do have pellets that are in there. They didn't they stopped in there, so they're not all continuing through.
Okay, how many pellets were captured in his shoulder?
I captured, I don't know how many I captured. I collected a sampling of the pellets that were along the wound path.
But you took x-rays.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily the total amount, because some of them, exited and some were in the brain. So the x-rays were taken without the brain in the head because the brain came separately.
Okay, but they did send you the brain.
Yes.
Did you take x-rays of the brain?
No, I did not.
Why not?
I didn't take x-rays of the brain
And the
because I
reason- oh, go ahead.
determined that wasn't necessary for me at the time.
To support your conclusion.
I didn't take x-rays of the brain. I guess hindsight is always 20/20. I could have taken x-rays of the brain. I could have taken more photos. I could have taken a photo of the brain at the autopsy. I did not. And I would have liked to, but I can tell from the examination of the body that I had an entrance wound to my left shoulder and it's exiting at the top of the head. It's not a contact wound to the top of the head.
Okay.
That's my determination.
Okay, but the reason you didn't take x-rays of the brain was you'd already reached your conclusion, correct? That you didn't need it because this was an entrance wound.
Well, I did not, because I felt comfortable with my determination.
And decided therefore not to take x-rays of the brain.
Well, I don't always take x-rays of every organ. I was comfortable I would be able to recover some pellets on the brain, and it wasn't necessary to show the spread.
How many cases have you been involved in where the brain literally exploded out of the head? I mean, that weren't suicides.
Where the brain exploded out of the head.
Well, as the book describes it,
Well, I think that the determination that an entrance wound to the top of the head, contact range, all of that gas expansion would not have, the brain would not have escaped that. There would have been a defect, cavity, or fragmentation of the brain, which was not there. You can see the brain actually.
do you remember what my original question was?
What was your question?
Okay, my question was, how many cases have you done an autopsy of a contact wound to the top of the head, which wasn't a suicide?
Very, very few.
Less than one?
I don't remember exactly, but it's not a tip. Usually contact shotgun wounds. Usually contact shotgun wounds are suicides.
And typically it's in the mouth.
They can be under the chin, in the mouth, sometimes they're to the side of the head. There are people that do shoot themselves onto the top of the head as well. And I can't recall exactly if, I remember any of those.
And in all those cases, the brain explode out of the cranium?
No.
Okay. So you would agree with me that the way that well, strike that. Let's go a little bit further with where we're going here. Could you put up the x-ray of the shoulder? You can go ahead and take your seat and testify from up there. Okay, tell us what this is.
Yes, they are pellets, and I have his shoulder, kind of out when I take the wound. We have some pellets remaining in the shoulder area. We have some disruption of the shoulder tissue here, some of the bone, and then we have some. We actually have less. We have more spread. They're more spread out as they're going closer to the neck.
So there are pellets in the top of the arm, the shoulder. Where is this? Right up in here?
Yes,
Okay. And then there's additional pellets, it looks like, down below that, like near his ribs, correct?
that's because it's starting to spread, yes.
And it's starting to spread to get to this place right here.
What place?
Is this where
No, it's in the neck.
it's in the neck? Okay.
And indicated that I recovered. It's over here, then some of it is actually in the trachea as well. So that's the windpipe of the neck. So we have some in the neck. This is the chest area. It did not go into the chest.
Okay, let me see another x-ray, please. What was that exhibit? I'm sorry, I didn't announce it. 112. Okay, let me see the next x-ray. Okay, and where is that?
That is the top of the left shoulder and the left arm.
Okay. And you see a number of pellets there.
Yes,
That would be right in this area right here?
yes.
Okay. Next, there's, I think, one more x-ray. Okay, and are there any pellets here? Or are those the same pellets down there at the bottom?
Yeah, well, we
see-
have, you can see, there are pellets here. You can see them in the head. There's some pellets in the head. The brain is not within the cranial cavity, but we do see some of the pellets ended up over here on the right side. See, R for right. There's the hole at the top of the head, and some of the pellets they're spread out on the right side of the head.
How many?
Well, I can see there's 3 here.
Three?
On the right side of the head.
Okay. So if how many pellets are there in a 12-gauge shotgun shell? And these are used primarily for duck hunting.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm an expert at examining human bodies and determining the injuries that occurred. And, I don't know how many pellets would be. When I took my boards, I may have had to actually know that, but I don't use this information you can ask your ballistics expert.
Well, we did. And I think they said something like,
I don't really know the answer to that. I'm not going to disagree with the ballistics expert. I do have a trajectory an exit wound on the right side of the back of the head.
how many pellets were in the body? Left
I
and
did
right?
not count them. I just collect a representative sample of it. I don't collect all of them, and I don't count all of them.
And we know you don't know how many were in the brain because you didn't x-ray the brain, correct?
That's correct.
But if there were 70 pellets or 75 pellets in his shoulder, his chest, and his neck, and hypothetically, there are anywhere between 135 and 160 pellets in the normal duck shot. That's 40 pellets that travel on, for the sake of argument, correct?
Well,
My math.
I don't
Use
really,
my math.
I don't feel comfortable answering these questions because it's not, the specific ballistics are not my area of expertise.
I'm not going to ask you about.
I really don't
ballistics.
feel comfortable answering them. I
Just-
examine human bodies and come to my determinations based on the wounds. And I can see I was correct that this is a shotgun wound to the left shoulder that's going up to the right side of the head. And questions about numbers I really don't want to I can't answer that because, I don't know everything. I'm an expert. I'm a physician. I'm an expert at examining human deceased individuals, determining cause and manner of death.
Okay, let's go back to the original question, and I assume.
I don't know the answer to the shotgun, how many pellets there would be.
We're not asking you how many pellets, but if there's 75 pellets, let's do some math here. This is simple math.
Okay, I can do math.
Okay, 75 pellets we can count in the body. the chest, the neck. And there's anywhere from 135 to 165 pellets in the normal duck shot, 12 gauge shot.
All right, so 75 plus 60, that would be 135. And then what did you say, 70 or 80?
75.
Okay, 75. So we started with 75 plus 75 is 150. So that's your answer. If your question is, you're asking me to do the math.
So my question is this. After those pellets have gone through the shoulder and hit bone, apparently, correct?
Yes.
And then they go through the neck. Do they hit more bone there?
There was some damage to the cartilage of the trachea. It was in the tracheal wall and some muscle. There's not a lot of like bone in the neck. The only bone really in the neck
Right.
is the spinal column.
Well, I guess what I'm saying, when you were talking about Maggie a moment ago, and you talked about a shot that I think grazed her skull, you said there was a lot of intracranial pressure. Is that right? Created a lot of intracranial pressure.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm trying to figure out, and maybe you can help me. Your testimony is there was enough from the less than half the load that goes through to, was it one place it hit? Was it had to go through the brain still?
Yeah. Well, I didn't say that less than half the load went through. Some of it may have actually exited the top of the head. I don't know. Or went into the brain. I did not x-ray the brain. And so I don't know exactly how many, but we can tell that this is the direction.
Was the brain macerated?
No, it was largely intact. There was some maceration at the base of the brain where it was torn from the brainstem. Okay, the brain went up and torn from the brainstem, but it was pretty much surprisingly intact, from a shotgun load.
Have you looked at the crime scene photos?
I really didn't look at the crime scene photos with any kind of, attention.
Okay, so, but you are aware that the brain was catapulted out of his head, probably hit the ceiling and then landed outside.
Well, I could tell from examining the body that the brain catapulted out of the head because I
Okay.
received the brain and a hole that was consistent with the brain leaving it.
Can you and I agree, and based on your testimony when you previously testified, that there would not be, that the gas from 2 or 3 feet away would not travel through the arm, travel through the neck, and then go into the brain?
Well, there's a lot of material that's going through, and plus we've got fragments of the brain, the skull, of the base of the brain that can also, there's a lot of energy going in that direction. Whether it's gas or not, it's energy from portions of ammunition propelling in that direction. So, whether you want to call it gas or whether it's other things, I really don't know the theoretical explanation. I'm sure it's in the book. But I examine the bodies and I make the determination on the direction and the type of injury from examining the human body.
The book seems to indicate that the primary cause for an explosion such as this, the brain exploding out, is the gas. You would agree?
Well, I think each case is a little bit different. And the kind of gas that would cause the head to explode would also, I think the book is talking about gas, gas in a contact shotgun wound. So what is your question about the book? I would actually have to refresh my recollection because I don't really I haven't read the book in a long time, but I know what I've seen on the body.
If I quote this to you, you would, and I can show it to you. The gas entering the closed chamber of the head expands rapidly, adding to the pressure waves acting on the bony framework of the skull. The only way for the skull to relieve the pressure produced is to shatter. Do you
Yeah.
agree with that?
That actually must be describing a contact shotgun.
It is.
wound. Okay, yeah, because that really makes sense for a contact shotgun. wound.
And your reasoning for this, the same phenomenon that happened without the gas is?
Well, we've got injury coming from beneath. The skull is, like I told the jury, that is not shattered. We do have some horrible injury, but the shattering of the skull, much of it is still up intact. We don't have shattering of every bone. We don't have shattering of the face. So
Why didn't you shave the head?
why didn't I shave the
Right, were
head?
you looking for any, if much of the skull was still there?
Look, my determination, I didn't shave the head because I was confident that that was an exit wound on the right side of the top of the head. It wasn't necessary for me to shave an exit wound.
So, but if you had shaved the head, and again, apparently you'd already come to your opinion by this point, you could have seen whether it was soot or stippling or any distortion around, or taken samples of the hair and determine whether or not there was any sort of GSR in it, which would be more consistent with a contact wound.
Well, no, GSR can just be we know gunshot residue can deposit in, I'm not like ballistics is not necessarily my strongest suit, but I know that GSR can deposit, within a few feet. Somebody doesn't have to indicate a contact wound.
Okay, so did the shot penetrate the jawbone?
It went through through that area. I believe it actually may have went underneath the bone.
So it did not connect with the bone? Correct?
Yes.
Are any of the pellets that you see in the shoulder, the left shoulder, heading down instead of up?
Well, there's probably kind of a billiard ball effect when these things are going through, and there could be some, directionality but I didn't make that determination because it wasn't important to me to
See
make
which
that
way the pellets were
determination.
going? To determine which way some of the pellets
Yeah.
were heading?
I can tell from the entirety of my finding at the autopsy.
Okay,
The thing is, if you look at something like, a postcard photograph, that doesn't necessarily tell you the whole story. I did my autopsy. I viewed all of the wounds. I was confident in the direction of this wound path. And I'm not trying to say, oh, well, which direction are the pellets going? I can see that there's the entrance wound was to the top of the left shoulder, went through the left side of the neck and out the top of the head.
And how many pellets made it through the brain to the skull? To fracture the skull? How many pellets?
Oh, well, there were some pellets in the brain. I don't know how many.
Because you didn't x-ray it.
Correct.
So since you don't count the number of pellets, tell the jury, please, how you know how many pellets hit the skull and fractured it and allowed this eruption to occur.
I don't know how many pellets. I never said that I did.
No, I didn't say you said it. I just want to know if you know it.
I don't know the answer to that.
And it's not important to you.
It doesn't really matter. It's really very theoretical. I examined the bodies and I made my determination based on examination of the body.
Is it true that an autopsy report should be able to be read by an independent pathologist to come to a conclusion?
Yes.
Okay. Are you ready? Okay, how about put that up for us, please?
Noises,
I'm sorry, sir?
some strange noises. Who's talking? You're questioning the witness? Proceed.
I'm asking Doug to put up exhibit number.
I didn't hear you talking. I heard
Oh, I'm
you were
sorry.
questioning the witness and
I
then a
may have
strange
mumbled.
voice
I
comes from.
apologize. What's the exhibit number?
Stage 487.
Okay. So, how about step down here, please? And get the pointer for me, please. And stand over there, please, so the jury can see. So you indicated there were, I asked you if you shaved the head. You said no. You said there wasn't, I think your words were there was enough of the skull there to determine what happened. Is there?
Well, I know this is an exit wound from examining the entirety of the findings, and I did not need to shave the hair.
From
That
the,
was my opinion and determination at the time of it.
yes, ma'am, we understand that, but what, did you look at this to confirm or question your opinion, or have you already come to your opinion?
Well, I always am questioning it myself during the autopsy. It's not just, I look at take a long time to look at everything before I reach a conclusion. Okay, so the totality of findings here told me this was an exit wound. The brain came pretty much intact. It was propelled out at the top of the head. I believe and I'm confident that this is an exit wound, and I did not do further investigation to rule out an entrance wound because I was confident it was not.
So you just said you were confident and you did not look further because you were confident you were right.
Well, I looked at it, and in fact, I took a photograph of it, and this is consistent with an exit.
It's what?
Consistent with an exit. The brain came out of that defect. If it were a shotgun entrance wound, there would be a lot more destruction of the head.
And again, you've never seen a contact wound to the head that wasn't in a suicide case.
You know, I don't honestly remember that.
So you don't remember, let me just rephrase, you don't remember having a case involving a contact wound to the head that wasn't a suicide case. You just don't remember it.
I may have, it's possible I did not survey, I may have seen one where somebody was shot at point blank range with a shotgun, and then the entire head is gone. So when I get that kind of, if there was a contact shotgun, whether it's suicide or homicide, the entire head would have been basically blown off.
And so in every case, there's no reason for us to go there because you don't remember ever seeing a case where there was a contact wound and to the back of the head.
Objection asked.
I think it's honestly, whether it's self-inflicted or inflicted by somebody else, the features of the body are going to be the same. So that's my answer. And I can't, whether I remember it or not, I've done a lot of autopsies. I don't necessarily remember how many or if I've done one, but I imagine people are shot at close or contact range with a shotgun. And in a contact shotgun, whether it's by suicide or homicide, the entire head would have been basically blown apart. This is terrible. And I know it's terrible. It's probably the worst thing you ever saw, but there would be a lot more damage with a contact shotgun. And that's my professional opinion based on my experience. And if other people disagree with me, that's fine. I don't have to convince them. This is my determination based on my education and multiple years of experience doing autopsies and being a forensic pathologist.
And I think in your testimony, whenever that was, weeks ago, you conceded that reasonable pathologists can differ, correct?
Yes, I think I said, you asked me if a reasonable person, you didn't actually ask me if a reasonable pathologist, you asked me if a reasonable person could have a different opinion. And I remember that because I was sorry that I didn't say, well, of course, reasonable people can think that, but a reasonable pathologist could also think that, but I would disagree with that. Okay. I don't think all opinions, a reasonable pathologist could have an opinion like that, but I think it would really be wrong.
Okay, Maggie, you go ahead and take the stand, please. Have you discussed you've met and discussed with Dr. Kinsey Kenny Kinsey, about his findings?
I did meet with him once, when a couple of weeks prior to the autopsy, I really never, prior to this trial, I met with the prosecution's team. And I would have been available to meet with you if you called me as well. But Ken Kinsey was responsible for the crime scene. What he had to say was, I really wasn't, I already written my autopsy report. I already came to my decision, my determinations based on my examination of the body. And whatever it was, he's going to do the crime scene. So I don't remember having any specific conversation.
You don't remember talking to him about vectors and where the blood spatter would have gone? And
Yeah, well, he asked me, he said, do you know anything about this? And I said, that's your department. I really am not a blood spatter expert. So I had nothing to offer, and I really didn't encourage listening to it because it's not my area.
And let me say a couple of things. One is, you indicated that you did not put that packing material in your autopsy report, correct?
Yes,
And today's the first time you've ever said anything about packing, correct?
yes.
Okay. Secondly, let me just sort of summarize this and see if we can get this over with. There are certain things you did not do in this autopsy because you concluded it wouldn't be helpful in reaching your conclusion, correct?
I agree with that.
Like no x-ray of the brain.
I would have been, I did not x-ray the brain, right?
Okay. There were, and your belief is that the shotgun wound to the shoulder being so much bigger is because of the angle?
Yes,
Okay. And then it narrows down to, you would concede as a hole in his neck.
yes,
Okay. Shotgun starts out wider. That shot starts out wider. I think we confirmed that.
the defect on the shoulder is
Right.
wider because it's kind of going across the shoulder. So it's going to create a defect on the shoulder that's wider than something entering at a right angle or perpendicular. So and I think that makes sense to me. It's consistent with what I've seen in more than 20 years of my practice. And there wasn't anything that seemed odd about that.
And you would concede you're not a ballistics expert.
I know the kind of ballistics. Some forensic pathologists know a lot about ballistics. I know probably an average amount.
Okay. And so when you say it started out wider and then came down to this hole, have you discussed that with any ballistics experts?
It doesn't require, that's forensic pathology. That's damage to the body. I don't need to be a ballistics expert, and I've done enough autopsies on shotgun wounds to make that determination without requiring additional ballistics knowledge.
But we can see that the shotgun starts out, the shot starts small and then the pellets expand.
Objection asked and answered, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
Why there's no shot in his cheek if it's expanding? Why are there no pellet holes here?
Because they probably we have some wadding going in there.
Probably.
Yeah, I think that is consistent with the wadding. And there are, there's some pellets remaining in the wadding as well.
The wadding going where?
That's an entrance wound. Okay, it's entering perpendicularly. Why do we have, the pellets did not terminate in the cheek. They continued upward.
But a number of them terminated in the shoulder,
Yes,
in the chest, up here, right?
yes.
And then
Not
they-
the chest,
then
the
they
neck,
stop bas-
not the
I'm
chest.
sorry?
Not the chest, the neck.
But the neck, the shoulder and upper neck, right?
Yes.
And then, if they stop expanding here, so the cheek isn't, one of those pellets is,
Objection asked and answered to the former question.
Your Honor?
It's been asked and answered. I sustain the objection.
And you say these x-rays are consistent with your opinion?
Yes.
beg the court's indulgence. Oh, let me ask you one question about the Maggie wound. Your position is that the tags don't indicate anything.
Well, they are not determinative. They're something we look at, but the tags on the breast are very non-specific. They're not very good tags. We happen to have nice tags on the back of the skull. Frequently, the tags are more reliable when the skin is tighter over an area.
So on Maggie, you're saying one shot's going up and the other one's going down.
Yes.
Okay. Beg the court's indulgence. Holly, anything else? Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, doctor.
Just two questions. 5,500 autopsies, you said, correct?
Yes, and since I was here last, maybe I've done another dozen, so over 5,500.
And you rely on practical observations of actually observing the body, is that correct?
That's correct. I do my autopsies, and based on my experience and knowledge as a forensic pathologist, I know about the bodies, examining the bodies. That's what I rely on.
And your
Other two questions, more.
I have just a couple more, Your Honor. In your opinion, is there any way Paul's face would have remained intact if he had suffered a contact wound from the top of the head?
No,
And in your opinion, is this obviously a wound in this direction as you've described?
Objection, Your Honor. Repetitive. She's testified 5 times. That's her opinion.
The objection is sustained.
Further on.
Thank you. Nothing
Further. Thank you. You may step down.
okay.
Your next witness.
Your Honor, state calls T.C. Smalls.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that any testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You will please sir, sit right up there. State your full name for the record and spell your last name, please.
My name is Thomas C. Smalls. Folks call me T.C. Smalls. SMALLS.
Sheriff Smalls, how you doing today?
I'm doing good.
All right. Tell the jury just a little bit about yourself, and I called you sheriff, so if you could just kind of explain that to them a little bit.
Okay, in law enforcement for 39 years, 8 months. I retired in December. 16 years of those 39 years was, I served as sheriff of Hampton County. Been in Hampton County all my life. I'm a pastor. Pretty much married, 4 kids, 7 grandkids, and just trying to enjoy some retirement. I retired December 31st day of December 2022. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to pull you back in. You said you just retired, huh?
Yes.
All right. Do you know the defendant, Alec Murdaugh?
Yes, I do.
Have you known him for years?
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever have a conversation with Alec Murdaugh about him asking you permission or even telling you about installing blue lights in his private vehicle?
No, sir. I never had a conversation with Alec Murdaugh. Matter of fact, I never had a conversation with anyone in my 39 years about installing blue lights in their personal vehicle.
That's not something that's done, is it, sir?
Oh, no.
Did you know anything about the defendant claiming that you permitted him to do so until he testified to that last week?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Didn't know anything about it?
Didn't know anything about it.
And he never approached you at any point about that?
No, sir.
Did he ever approach you about any threats or anything as a result of the boat case, the boat wreck case?
No, he never have.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Cross-examination.
Well, it's 12:01. Good afternoon, Sheriff Smalls.
How you doing?
My name's Jim Griffin.
Okay.
I'm a little hoarse. This pollen's getting to me, but it won't take long. You've known Alec Murdaugh for many, many years, is that correct?
Correct.
And he was a volunteer solicitor in Hampton County, 14th Circuit, for a number of years, correct?
I realized he worked along with his father
Right.
as a, I don't know whether, I thought he was an assistant solicitor. But he worked along with his father as, in Hampton County.
But he held the position of assistant solicitor of the 14th Circuit,
Yes, he did.
and he worked with his father
Right.
trying cases in Hampton County and perhaps Colleton County and other places. You aware of that?
Correct. Yes, sir.
And are you aware of him trying any cases when it wasn't with his father?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And his father was, we're talking about Randolph Murdaugh,
Correct.
and he was previously solicitor. Is that correct?
Right.
And are you aware that Alec Murdaugh was issued a badge for that position?
No, I was not.
Okay. And there's some, you were questioned about permission that, whether you gave him permission to have a blue light installed in a vehicle, and you said you did not, correct?
Correct.
Do you know whether Anthony Russell gave him permission?
I can't answer that.
Now, who's Anthony Russell?
Well, during my time when I was sheriff, Anthony Russell was a captain in my administration. He later became sheriff after I retired. He ran and he won the office of sheriff, and he holds the office now.
And he was maybe not your right-hand man, but he was pretty high up in your administration.
He was a captain.
Okay. And then Chauncey Solomon, what was his position?
Chauncey Solomon was a lieutenant.
And Perry Singleton, he was passed away. What was his position?
He was a lieutenant.
And you know that Deputy Russell, Deputy Solomon, Deputy Singleton were very close to Alec Murdaugh. Were you aware of that?
Well, I knew they knew him. I don't know how close they were.
Okay. And did Eddie Gibson install the blue lights on the vehicles for the sheriff's department?
Not for my cause. Most of my vehicles light was done with a company out of Orangeburg, and then later we started working with a gentleman by the name of Charles Mitchell that installed lights, and he out of, I think, Hardyville or Bluffton.
So you don't know who do you know who Eddie Gibson
Oh, I
is?
know who Eddie Gibson. He worked for me at one time.
And when he worked for you, did he install blue lights? He worked on the vehicles, the fleet of vehicles?
No, not my vehicles.
Well, when he worked for you, what did he do?
He was a deputy sheriff. He patrolled.
And so like you're unfamiliar that at any point in time, Mr. Murdaugh had a blue light in his vehicle.
I never had any knowledge that he had blue lights in his vehicle.
Oh, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Okay, further.
Your Honor, can I approach, may we approach very quickly?
Yes.
Sheriff Smalls, when did you retire again?
I retired December the 31st, 2022.
2022, so just a couple months ago.
Right.
Thank you for coming today.
Thanks, sir.
No, you are.
Thank you, sir. You call your next witness.
Take all the phone, man.
Do you swear or affirm that any testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You would, sir, please be seated. State your full name for the record and spell it. Last name, please.
Paul McManigal, McManigal.
All right. Good afternoon. Sergeant McManigal, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you're employed with the Charleston County Sheriff's Office?
I am.
And you testified previously in this trial, correct?
Yes, I have.
Just briefly remind the jury exactly what topic you testified on earlier. Briefly, please.
I was tasked with redacting Alec Murdaugh's cell phone records to remove any possible client-attorney privileged information.
All right. And during that testimony, you were not qualified as an expert, correct?
That is correct.
All right. But you have been qualified in previous trials?
Yes, I have.
And approximately how many times have you been qualified as an expert previously in other trials?
About 10.
10 times. Okay. And is that in cell phone forensics?
Part of it was about, refer to my notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 6 times of that was in cell phones forensics. The other was crime scene investigation.
Okay. All right. And just let's briefly go down as quick as you can. Let's go through your training experience in cell phone forensics, please.
Okay. I'm currently assigned to the United States Secret Service Cyber Fraud Task Force, which is where I received most of my training. I have been trained in basic computer evidence recovery, advanced computer forensics, oxygen forensic suite training, blacklight examiner, advanced mobile device examiner, Celebrite physical and logical examination, XRY certification training, Macintosh triage and imaging, Apple iDevice forensics, Celebrite advanced JTAG extraction, network intrusion response, vehicle forensics, digital video recorder evidence and recovery, ransomware investigation response training, and several other webinars.
At this time, state would seek to admit Sergeant McManigal as an expert in cell phone forensics.
So qualified.
Sergeant McManigal, last week you were present when a gentleman named Micah Sturgis testified for the defense, correct?
That is correct.
And specifically, he testified about this feature in iPhone known as wake.
Raise to wake.
Raise to wake, correct?
Yes, sir.
And briefly explain to the jury what that function is and what it serves as in the cell phone, for the iPhone, excuse me.
Raise to wake is when the cell phone is laying down and you pick it up. It realizes that somebody's picking up the device and tries to assist by turning on the display so that you could possibly unlock it with your face unlock.
All right. Or read a notification, possibly, if there's a notification on the screen.
That's correct.
And so it's designed to turn on that screen when it thinks someone's picking up the phone to look at the screen, correct?
That is correct.
All right. There's been previous testimony, I think, by Mr. Sturgis and other experts in this case that the iPhone, if the screen is off, it will not record an orientation change, correct?
If the screen is off, it will not record an orientation.
You agree with that opinion?
I agree, yes.
And you were asked after Mr. Sturgis' testimony to investigate a little bit more about this raise to wake feature, correct?
I was.
And specifically, as demonstrated with the jurors, the screen's going to turn on when the phone is picked up gently, correct?
That is correct.
Because the phone thinks it's being picked up to be looked at, correct?
That is correct.
You're asked to investigate with a test device whether that screen lights up every time a phone is picked up in a more violent fashion or quicker fashion, correct?
Correct. When the phone is picked up more aggressively or moved more aggressively, the device will not turn on the screen.
And that's because the way raise to wake feature is based off of what in the cell phone? What's telling it to wake up?
The
sensor?
accelerometer primarily.
Okay. And so the accelerometer is sensing motion, correct?
Correct.
And so if it senses a slight amount of motion, it's going to turn the screen on because it thinks someone's picking up to look at it, correct?
Can't lead the witness.
And so if the cell phone only detects a slight amount of motion, what does it do? What does the iPhone do?
So if the iPhone registers a slight amount of motion, it thinks it's being picked up, so it will turn on the screen. But if it's being picked up more aggressively, it won't. And that's a battery protection feature. If you had the iPhone in your pocket and you were jogging, you don't want the screen to stay on the whole time. So when the phone is moving more aggressively, the screen does not turn on.
And so you're asked to do some tests in your lab with a test device, correct?
That is correct. I obtained an iPhone 11 Pro Max, which is the same make and model as the phone that Maggie had.
All right. And what software version was on your test device?
The software that was on my device is iOS 14.8. The one that was on Maggie's was iOS 14.6. So the iOS that was on my device that I tested was slightly newer.
Okay. And did you perform a series of tests with various motions and various throws with this phone to determine, and were you able to develop an opinion of when the screen might come on and when it might not?
Objection, Your Honor. Rule 5, this is an experiment form of evidence, actually something seized, and we have not been provided this.
Objection is overruled. Rule 5 does not apply.
Thank you. So you did perform a number of tests, correct?
Yes, sir. Performed many tests over the weekend. I pick it up and shake it, pick it up and throw it. I threw it off to my desk. I knocked it off of my desk. I tried to flip it end over end. I tried to throw it like a Frisbee. I did each one at least 10 to 20 times.
Okay. And were the results 100% conclusively? I mean, did the phone do the same thing every time?
No, not at all. Sometimes the screen would turn on. When I threw it, land face up, and then the screen would turn on. But a lot of the times I would throw it and the screen would not turn on. It depends on how the accelerometer registered that movement.
So based off of your test, is it your opinion that an iPhone of the same make and model as Maggie's could be thrown and the screen not turned on?
Can't lead the witness.
All right. Did you develop an opinion about whether the screen would turn on every time a phone was thrown?
If the phone is thrown, the screen does not always turn on. In my experimentation, I determined that when the phone is thrown more like a Frisbee, 9 out of 10 times, the screen does not turn on. The times that it did turn on most often was when I pick it up and tried to shake it, then the screen would come on briefly.
Okay. But 9 out of 10 times when you toss a phone like a Frisbee, the screen would not turn on. Correct?
That is correct.
I prefer from the state.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
When you performed these experiments, did you record them in any way?
I did not.
You didn't video record doing any of this?
I did not.
Did you consider video recording any of these experiments?
Actually, it never crossed my mind.
You just did the experiments and then just sort of orally relay when you could have had a video to show us?
That is correct.
If you were going to throw a phone out from a moving vehicle, wouldn't you need to pick it up, to toss it?
Certainly.
And if I understand the previous testimony, when you pick it up, the screen comes on.
When you pick it up gently.
So if you pick it up to toss it out the window while you're driving, you got to pick it up. Is that correct?
Correct. And if you pick it up aggressively, it will not.
But not always.
Not always.
Sometimes will, sometimes won't.
Correct.
according to the experiments that you conducted since, when did you do these experiments?
I started it Friday afternoon and into Saturday.
So you did these experiments this last weekend.
Correct.
You did not record any data.
I did not.
You just played with the phone and are coming here to express your observations.
That's correct.
Do you have the phone that you used to do these experiments with you?
Not with me.
Are you aware of how the phone in this, Maggie's phone in this case, when it was located, what its position was? Have you seen the photos?
I have.
And was it screen up?
It was screen up.
Would you agree then that it had to be thrown from a screen up position, because if it was screened down and you turned it over to throw it out, the screen would come on?
Of course not. It can tumble through the air.
So if the phone was screened down in the car and it ends up screen up over here, it has to turn over, right?
At least one time. Yes, sir.
And do you, I guess, disagree with the previous testimony and demonstration that when you take the phone and turn it over, the screen comes on?
No, when you pick it up gently, the screen does come on.
We say pick it up. If you rotate it on that axis so that it's screen down to screen up, does the screen come on?
If I pick it up gently and rotate it, the screen comes on. If I pick it up aggressively, it does not.
And if it's facing you and rotates 90 degrees, does the screen come on?
Only if you do it gently. Again, if you do it aggressively,
How
it will not.
gently? Did you measure any of these forces?
I did not.
You just threw the phone around in your office?
Absolutely.
So you didn't record what you were doing, and you did not measure any data. Was this because you were afraid that you would have to disclose that data if you recorded it?
Of course not, no.
Do you normally do experiments and don't record any data or video, record anything?
It never crossed my mind to record video.
Do you believe that you would have to have disclosed that data if you had recorded it?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
I believe so, yes.
So the reason you didn't record data was that it would have to be produced, and then we could examine it and discover whether or not it was accurate.
No,
you
sir.
avoided that by not recording anything, correct?
No, sir. That's not correct.
Why didn't you record any data?
It did not cross my mind to video record my experiments. I just did the experiments to determine whether or not
And you
the screen
didn't,
would
you
come
didn't
on.
occur to you to measure how fast you were moving the phone, maybe to even find out what is that threshold you claim where the phone goes from turning on to not turning on? Exactly when does that happen? You have no idea, do you?
No, sir. It would take me much longer to do these experiments to determine the exact speed and force required to turn the display on versus not.
Did you discover any, or did you attempt to locate any documentation regarding the raised awake feature on the iPhone?
I did. I tried extensively. I reached out to several different forensic focus groups that I'm a part of, and we were not able to find any white papers on the subject.
So you were unable to find any actual data on it, so you resorted to throwing your phone around alone? Was anyone with you when you did this?
No, sir. I was alone in my office.
So you're alone in your office, throwing the phone around, taking no measurements, recording nothing over the weekend, and then you come in here and testify as an expert as to what the phone will do.